Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Dirty J here, and today I want to talk about FPS in Fortnite. So when you install the game normally, you would have the highest settings possible for your computer, so you might end up having very few frames per second. This depends normally on the monitor you're using. So for example, if you're using a 60 Hz monitor, this can be a problem if you're only getting 30 frames per second or less. So for example, for the settings that I have, for me now, I'm having around 75 to 84 frames per second. So if you look in the distance, normally the frames will fall, and that's why you see here I'm having like 70 frames per second. And if you're looking to stuff close to you, normally your frames are a little bit higher because the computer graphic cards doesn't have to render a lot of frames. As you can see now, I'm having like 130 frames per second approximately. So if we go back to the settings and check what settings are in there, so you can see here, for example, quality presets, that's custom, we can ignore that. The 3D resolution should be at 100%. That's pretty important so that you can have a real good quality of your 3D animation. The view distance for PC, I personally prefer having it at epic, but just for demonstration purposes I'll put it to near. And then all of this, you should just turn them off. You don't need shadows, you don't need anti-aliasing, textures, effects, or post-processing. So for this, it is very important to have higher frames per second so that you can react faster while playing the game, and then to have a better quality, unless your graphics card is good enough for this. When we go to the advanced graphics settings, for the VSync is on normally. I will personally turn it to off. This means when VSync is off, you can get higher frame rates. That's what you're looking for, but it can result in horizontal screen tearing. So for me, this is not a problem, but if it's a problem for you, maybe you should just leave it at on. I should turn off motion blur. That's the worst thing you can have in game. It probably would make you sick. Show FPS, I've left it at on so that I can see what frames per second are in game, and for example if I get frame drops, then I can see that and maybe change the settings or something of the sort. For the DirectX version, you should definitely have it at DirectX 12 beta, not have it in the DirectX 11 which was previously there. So even though the DirectX 12 is still in the beta version, it mostly is more performance friendly, especially if you have a newer generation graphics card, and most graphic cards anyway do support DirectX 12. So if you're not sure if yours supports DirectX 12 or not, you should just Google your graphics card, and then you should check. Most, I think like over 80 to 90% of the graphic cards in the market right now do support DirectX 12. For the multi-threaded rendering, if you have a PC with more than 2 cores, something like 4 cores, 6 cores, 8 cores or so on, you should definitely allow multi-threaded rendering. This way your computer will be using more cores for the game rather than just the 4 usual cores it uses. So if we go here now, you can see that my frames have increased from around 75 frames per second to now I'm having here around 120 to 140 frames per second without doing anything much. And if we get in a small place, for example, now I'm having over 200 frames per second here now. You can see I'm getting 250 to 60 frames per second, sometimes even over 300 frames per second. So these are definitely the settings you should be using for the in-game. Of course, there are other things you can do which I will not go into at the moment, and that is, for example, you can always start Fortnite as an administrator, and that way you will not be having many problems, since your computer will be sending most of the resources to your Fortnite game and not to other programs. So Fortnite will have the priority uh, to use the graphics card and the CPU to render your frames faster, and thus giving you a higher frames per second. So that's pretty much it for now. I'll do some more research and make a more detailed video for the frames. There are so many settings you can play with, some computer internal settings. For example, in the chapter 2, they added things like grass or insects which are flying around, which are probably pulling down your frames. So for that you need a more detailed video, which I'll probably make in the near future. For now, this is it. You get an increase here of sometimes over 300, especially if you enclose spaces, and I think that's good enough. For me, I'm using the RTX 2070 graphics card just for comparison, so my performance is mostly good. I'm using a 144 monitor screen for playing. That's why I always have my frames limited at around 160 or 144, depending on my preference. And like I said, I'm playing on PC, and I really like having the view distance being epic. So that's it for now, guys. See you next time, and until then, have a nice day, good evening, or good morning. Bye.